The bullet whizzed past Mason's head, too close for comfort. He threw himself behind a crumbling wall, his heart hammering in his chest. Sweat dripped down his face, mixing with the dirt and grime already caked there. The sniper had him pinned down, and if he didn't act soon, he was a goner. He glanced toward the jeep, its door lying in the dirt just a few feet away. If he could reach it, the reinforced metal might just save him from the next shot. But first, he needed to find the sniper. Squinting through the shimmering heat, Mason scanned the ruined buildings. The war-torn landscape was a mess of jagged edges, broken windows, and dust that made everything blend together. He cursed under his breath. The bastard was good. Too good. No obvious signs of movement, no glint of sunlight off a scope. He knew the sniper was watching, waiting for him to make a mistake. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple, and Mason wiped it away, careful to keep low. His fingers clenched his rifle as he tried to slow his breathing. Then, there, a shadow moved in a window on the third floor of a building across the plaza. That had to be him. Mason brought his gun up slowly, lining up the shot. His finger hovered over the trigger. He took a deep breath, steadied his aim, and fired. 3 shots rang out in quick succession. He didn't wait to see if he hit. There was no time. He was already on his feet, sprinting toward the jeep door. The sniper wasn't done yet. Bullets kicked up the dirt around him, each one closer than the last. Mason's heart pounded, and his legs burned as he ran. His shoulder exploded with pain as a bullet grazed him, but he kept going. 3 feet. 2. He reached the door and yanked it upright just as another shot clanged off the metal. Panting, he ducked behind the door, his shoulder throbbing. He gritted his teeth, waiting for the next round of gunfire. But after a few moments, the shooting stopped. Mason stayed perfectly still, listening to the eerie silence. Was the sniper reloading? Did he hit him after all? The quiet stretched on, unsettling. Something didn't feel right. His eyes darted around the ruins, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. Then it hit him. This exact moment, this sequence of events, felt too familiar. Like he'd been here before, lived through this same scenario. Déjà vu. But this wasn't some trick of the mind. It felt more tangible, more deliberate. The edges of the buildings in the distance began to shimmer. Mason blinked, thinking it was the heat distorting his vision. But no. The structures were starting to fade, slowly dissolving into nothing. Panic gripped him as the landscape around him disintegrated. The jeep door in his hands flickered, then vanished entirely. No. No. Not again. Mason whispered, stumbling back. His legs wobbled, but there was nothing to grab onto. The ground beneath him turned black, swallowing everything around him. Mason crouched behind the rubble again, heart pounding, rifle gripped tight. His eyes darted toward the buildings, scanning for the sniper. The plaza was just as he'd left it. Dusty, desolate, war-torn. Only this time, something felt off. Something in his gut told him this wasn't real. Where was Johnny? They had been pinned down together, fighting their way to the extraction point. But in the chaos of gunfire and explosions, Mason had lost sight of him. Johnny could still be out there, or he could be dead. Mason didn't know anymore. He wiped the sweat from his brow and looked at the jeep door. It was still there, lying in the dirt just a few feet away. Again, he couldn't shake the feeling of déjà vu, stronger this time. The sniper, the heat, the door. It was all the same. He had already lived this. But how? His brain couldn't grasp it. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and his instincts screamed at him to figure it out before it happened again. The sniper fired. A shot ricocheted off the rubble near his head, snapping Mason back to reality. He had to move. Just like before, he spotted movement in the window across the plaza. He lined up his rifle, fired off a few shots, and sprinted for the jeep door, pain shooting through his leg as another bullet grazed him. The door clanged as bullets struck it, the same as before. And then, silence. But Mason wasn't buying it this time. He crouched behind the door, his breath shallow. The scene around him began to waver again, the same shimmering effect at the edges of the buildings. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the world to fall apart around him, but when he opened them, everything had changed. He wasn't in the plaza anymore. The distant sound of gunfire and the smell of dust were gone. Instead, Mason found himself sitting at a bar. The dim lights flickered overhead, casting shadows on the walls. The low murmur of conversation buzzed in his ears, and the clink of glasses broke through his confusion. What the hell? Mason glanced down. No combat gear, no rifle. Just a leather jacket, jeans, and a half-empty glass of beer in front of him. His heart was still racing, his hands shaking. How did he get here? Across the bar, Johnny sat casually, swirling whiskey in his glass with a smirk. "Took you long enough," Johnny said, raising his drink in a mock toast. Mason's stomach lurched. What the hell is going on?" he stammered, eyes wide. "Where are we?" Johnny chuckled, shaking his head. "Calm down, man. We're not really here." Mason blinked, still trying to make sense of it all. "What do you mean we're not here?" "This isn't real, Mason. None of it. Not the sniper, not the war zone. It's all part of the simulation." Johnny leaned back in his chair, the smirk never leaving his face. "You're stuck in a loop. You keep living the same thing over and over because you're not getting it." Mason's pulse quickened. "A simulation? None of this is real?" Johnny's expression turned serious. "Yeah, man. You're trapped in a program. Training or whatever. They've got you looping until you figure it out." Mason's mind raced. Everything started clicking into place. The endless feeling of déjà vu. The way the world faded away only to start again. He wasn't in a war zone. He was inside a simulation, stuck in some endless loop. "How do I get out?" Mason asked, his voice tight with panic. Johnny shrugged, taking another sip of whiskey. "Simple. Stop running." Mason stared at him. "Stop running? Yeah. You keep trying to survive, to win. But that's not the point. You're not supposed to win this. You're supposed to learn." Johnny's voice was calm, but his words were unsettling. Mason opened his mouth to argue, but then the bar began to blur. His surroundings shimmered and faded, just like the battlefield had before. "See you next time," Johnny said with a wink as the world went dark. Mason crouched behind the rubble, the weight of his rifle heavy in his hands. His breath was steady, his heart calm. This time, he didn't rush. He didn't panic. The sniper was waiting. The jeep door lay in the dirt, and the bullets would come. But it didn't matter anymore. Mason stood up, rifle slung over his shoulder, and walked calmly across the plaza, ignoring the gunfire. The bullets zipped past him, but he didn't flinch. He kept moving, walking toward the alley, and this time, he wasn't running.